Hello and welcome back to the studio. Today's Bob Ross classic is Valley Waterfall. It's a smashing painting, lots and lots of bits of detail into it, a nice mountain, some fir trees and of course the waterfall. I pretty much get it right first time. I made a few little mistakes but not too many. I made some changes of course to suit my own particular style. I did have a bit of a happy accent and I used this to fix it. But what is this? Well, you'll have to watch the video to find out. So, sit back, relax, like me, with a nice cup of tea, and see how we get on. Happy painting, people. Here's my canvas. Today I'm using black gesso. I've got it on a plastic plate and I'm going to use a small foam brush. I'm going to take just a small amount and I want to lay out an area that's going to accommodate a mountain about the same size as my hand. I just put a few rough marks on first of all, just to get an idea of layout and scale. Once I'm happy with things, I can go back in and make it a little more permanent and a little darker. I like to mark out the position of my waterfall at this stage. I don't want to run out of space. I leave a little gap on the canvas. This will be just visible throughout the course of the painting. Now, let's finish blocking in the rest of this background and maybe adding a little more details to those background trees. Take a little more paint on that foam brush and then just turn it on a corner. And by gently tapping you can sort of roughen the shape of these trees. Don't worry if they're not perfect. At this stage it's just for position and a little bit of scale. I'll add one on this side and maybe a couple more on the other side. I'll come back and fill in the rest of it with the foam brush, just blocking it in, even quite roughly. I've left my canvas to dry completely, but now it's time to put some oil on the canvas. In this top section, I'm going to be using some Bob Ross liquid white oil paint. In the lower section, over the black, I'm going to be using some Bob Ross liquid clear. I'm going to need more brushes this time, so I've got a nice brush and two older brushes, one for the liquid white and one for the liquid clear. I also have a liner brush, a fan and a Filbert brush, and of course a Bob Ross palette knife. I'm going to start with the liquid white. I keep it in a small airtight container for ease of use. Just apply a very small amount to this area. There's not much canvas to cover, so don't overdo it. Keep it very, very thin. It doesn't matter if you go over the edges of the trees as well at this stage. If they look a bit misty and murky, that's absolutely fine. But just make sure you test your canvas and make sure it's not too wet. I have some how-to videos about liquid white and liquid clear and I'll put them down in the description below. Now, change brush, get a clean brush for the liquid clear. This wants to be applied very sparingly and scrubbed in over the black. Where it meets the white, just push the two together. In fact, the liquid clear can push the liquid white out the way. And the test is quite simple. Just run your finger around on it and make sure you can't leave any sort of mark. It wants to be very, very thinly applied. Here are some links to the how-to videos. I'm going to paint my sky first. I'm using my liquid white brush and a very small amount of phthalo blue. And because there's a mountain here in the centre and not much sky, I'm going to start here. At least if the area is too blue, it doesn't matter. It'll be under my mountain. But I want it a little bit paler at the corners, so I let the liquid white dilute my colour. I paint this sparingly again. I let some of the liquid white appear as clouds. There, these are some of the easiest clouds you'll ever paint. I switch brushes now back to the liquid clear brush, and I brush mix the phthalo blue and phthalo green together. Just let the colour drift up over the edge of these trees. It doesn't matter if a little bit gets into the background. It all works well in a sort of misty green effect. Now, make sure you test your canvas. Touch your fingers to it and make sure you get a good strong colour. That's more oil than colour and won't work very well at all. I especially make sure I got plenty here where I'm going to have the waterfall. Time for a mountain. Pull out your black, nice and flat, and take a small roll of it on the palette knife. I want to position this peak a little to the right, not too close to the top edge of the canvas, more like a sort of teepee shape. I can change it later on. I'm using this just for position. I'll add a couple more peaks to the left and another one to the right. And once again, don't worry too much about the trees. We'll come back and fix them later on. But I am scraping out the excess paint. Here you see I've changed the shape at the top of the mountain a little bit, and I'm always scraping out the paint. That's a clue to painting good mountains. You don't want a lot of excess colour on the canvas. I'm using my liquid white brush here just to remove the last of the paint. The canvas is very dry at this stage. Now, a small amount of titanium white with a little bit of phthalo blue and maybe just a touch of black just to grey it slightly, and I leave it sort of marbled. Don't overmix it. That'll be my shadow colour. My highlight is straight titanium white, and I pull it down very flat. I slide up and gather a small roll of paint, about as big as a cocktail stick. Now, point to the knife to the tip of the mountain and kick that handle away from the mountain. You want to make sure you follow the line of the mountain here. Top tip, don't leave a black outline to your mountain. It looks like it's been cut out of a book or a magazine. Let the paint break as you slide down the mountain. I reload some shadow colour for this left side of my mountain. The sun is coming from the right in my scene. And as you see, I bump against the white and slide over to the left. This doesn't take very much paint. The idea is to add some highlight and some shadow, but not to replace all the original dark colour. Keep on adding successive layers of white and shadow, building up your mountain. Hold the knife extremely gently at this stage. You just want it to float across the canvas and break. Gentle as a whisper, Bob used to say, and he was right. I'll add some more shadow here, and then maybe a little bit more highlight over to the other side. There. Quite a mountain range in such a small area, but I'm especially careful not to put too much paint on at the left, right and the base of the mountain. I shaped my mountain to a sort of a bowl shape, but didn't lose all these lovely dark areas. Now, time for some evergreens. I take black, phthalo green and phthalo blue and a little crimson and mix it all together. I want a dark turquoisey green colour. There, that's about right. I switch to a fan brush and I go through both sides, give the brush a little wiggle as you go to bring it to a chiselled edge. Let's improve these fir trees. I leave a few of the blurred background ones just for a bit of depth and distance. I leave a little bit of the green colour showing through. I think that works quite well too. So all I'm doing is really adding a third layer of information for your eyes. Some of these fir trees can have a little more detail, and I tip my brush over on its corner and I tap with a bit of a downward action to bend the bristles and make a downward sort of facing tree. I'll make this tree a little bigger to catch that little bit of black gesso that was showing behind the edge of the mountain. That looks about right. Now, take a little bit of grubby white on a fan brush. A few upward flicks, looks like snow between the tree trunks. Now, I switch back to my 1-inch brush that had the liquid white on it and go through cad yellow, Indian yellow and a little bit of my green colour. I push the brush forwards in the paint. Notice how it leaves a little ridge on the edge of the palette right ahead of the bristles. Now, underneath that snow line, touch. That little line of paint on the palette is mirrored by a little line of paint on the edge of the brush. And as you touch, it leaves a little highlight. Start just under the snow line and work down towards the top of the waterfall. As you come down, you can tip the brush slightly over on a corner. It gives you a nice sort of roll to the edge of the land by following the lay of the land. I tap a few more times here, but we'll see, that might be a mistake actually. No, this should be going slightly uphill because that's where the waterfall's coming from. Let's correct it. I got my liquid clear brush which had the green and the blue on it. I just tap it out. I like to decide where my waterfall's going to be. I knew where the top of it was because I left a little mark on the gesso. Now I'm measuring how far down it will go and how far to the left and to the right. These little marks will disappear when I put the waterfall in. Now, time for our bravery test. Take that nice 1-inch brush and go into a little bit of liquid white. The paint we're going to apply needs to be soft, it needs to flow nicely. I put out some more phthalo green and phthalo blue and I groom it well through the brush, maybe adding a little more titanium white to lighten it slightly. But there's quite a lot of liquid white in this mixture. Ready? Hold your breath. Now, with firm pressure, you want to just really lean on the canvas and then practice that stroke a couple of times like a golfer would do a swing. And then, well, time to go. Touch, press, pull. A nice little angle to it. And get ready, get ready. Shoom. Yep, Bob loved his sound effects and they work really well. Let's add another stroke. And shoom. Yeah. This is a lot of fun. And it really doesn't matter if you get it slightly wrong because you can fix it easily. It's gone a little wider than I thought it should be, but that's okay. I'll just cut it back a little bit. I want to make that a little stronger in the centre, so I just turn my brush at an angle as I come down. Time to add some splash and crash. I go into the titanium white with the corner of my 1-inch brush and just press it open to splay it apart, and then just in here, hold the brush at a downward angle and tap. Let the bristles open up and leave lots of little speckles, dots of colour. We'll enhance it later on. I've gone back to my 1-inch brush which had all the lovely grassy colours on, and this time I'm going to go back into some ochre, Indian yellow and cad yellow. Press and get a nice line of paint. And as you see, I'm going to build a riverbank coming from the other direction to hold the side of the waterfall in. Once again, tap. Add fresh paint to your brush on a regular basis and use that right hand corner maybe a little more, so just angle it slightly over. This is a neat little technique and one that some people sort of struggle to get right. I tap on the corner of my brush and turn the angle. Try and avoid it looking too stripy. And as you go downhill, you can just cross the edge of the waterfall and trim the edge off a little bit. I told you there was a neat little trick to pushing the waterfall back in our painting. I keep adding highlights to my painting, allowing them to run out as they reach the base of the falls, just beside the splash and the crash. I don't think there'll be a lot of light down there. Top tip here, get things in the right order. I need to pull the reflections down under the waterfall before I put in a bank on the right hand side. If I put the bank in first, then as I pull down, I would bump into the grass. Notice how I press downwards with a firm action. I'm using a fan brush here with a small amount of off-white paint, a bit more bluey in colour, just to sketch in the idea of some nice little ripples. Once I'm happy with the position, I'll go back and make them a little stronger and a little brighter. There, I think that's about right. So slightly stronger here, maybe in the centre, directly under the falls. Yes, I'll go back in and improve that area later on. I like to add a few little bright speckles to my waterfall using the edge of the fan brush too. As I mentioned at the beginning, my waterfall grew a little wider than expected. I need to trim some off, and it's easy to do with a palette knife. I'll take this section away. If you enjoy my tutorials, don't forget, like, subscribe, and leave a comment. You can even buy me a tube of paint. Link down below in the description. Thank you. Time to freshen up my palette. My yellows and greens have become sort of one green colour, like camouflage green. It really doesn't help my painting very much at all, so I gather it up and dispose of it. I know it looks like a waste and it's so tempting to carry on using that colour, but trust me, I think I've ruined more paintings through being sort of miserly with colour than enough. So dispose of it and put some fresh colours on your palette. And in a blink of an eye, we're ready to go again. I dry clean my brush a little as well. So some fresh cad yellow, fresh Indian yellow, and some sap green this time. I want a change of greens as well. It helps to change up your colours regularly throughout your painting so it doesn't get too samey. Notice how I push the paint ahead of the bristles and make a nice little bright edge. I tap gently at the top of the falls to leave a bright little highlight. Once again, remember how to turn the brush at an angle and tap downwards. Leave a few dark areas here and there to add depth and distance in your painting. Reload frequently and work down and away from the top of the falls, adding more and more layers of colour as you go. Now for some Filbert brush rocks. I know you struggle with these occasionally, so watch carefully. I go both sides through black paint with my Filbert brush to really mat the bristles together. It should be really well stuck. Make sure you groom it thoroughly. Now on one side I go through some sienna, some grubby white paint and a little ochre. But don't overmix it. Leave it sitting nice and thickly on one side of your brush. Now remember, the light is coming from the right and from above, so I want the highlight to the top and the shadow to the base. Think about starting further up the falls and touch and press and make a little sort of curving sort of action with the brush. It leaves a highlight and shadow all in one. This takes a little practice. Reload your brush frequently, and when it gets out of shape, add more dark and more highlight. But see, I just do one swipe through that highlight colour and then light touch and give it a little twist as we go. Use the shadow that you just created under the highlight against the next highlight. So you see in here there's a little bit of shadow there, and I come in just underneath it with a little curving action. I find this technique makes great smooth looking rocks and boulders. I think they call them river stones. I'll try using the technique to create some bigger stones down the sides of my falls, but I've got to say I rather like doing that with my palette knife, but well, let's give it a try. No, it doesn't quite work for me, I must admit. No matter how hard I try, they just don't look quite right. So I scrape them off with my palette knife and go back to my old faithful way of doing it. Some black on the edge of my palette knife. I'm using just a small blade here, and with a very light touch I just block in where I think those nice craggy rocks should be. Let it overlap into some of the green areas at the sides of the falls, and make sure these rocks are taller than the top of your falls. Mother Nature wouldn't like it if they were below the edge of the falls. Water would just run over the edge, wouldn't it? I use the same highlights on the edge of my palette knife and just take a small roll of sort of roughly mixed colour, a marble mixed colour. Now, see how lightly I hold my knife? Just finger and thumb. My other fingers just float in the air. I want to let this paint break and just follow the line of the stones down the edge of the falls. This is another great way of trimming back the falls if they got a little bit wider. Just make the stones overhang a bit further. I'll add a couple more stones to my waterfall. That's lucky. There's a nice dark hole just there. Perfect. Now, to settle those stones back into the waterfall, again, use the edge of your 1-inch brush, well loaded with some highlight colour, greens and yellows, and just touch over the edges of those dark rocky stones. It really makes all the difference to your painting. I was having so much fun with the waterfall, I nearly forgot about these trees. Let's go back and repair them. I'm using that dark green colour we mixed up earlier on, and with a fan brush I'm just going to go back in and retouch some of these branches. That one looks rather nice there. It just goes over the edge of my mountain. Remember, I didn't put too much titanium white there, did I? Now you know why. That tree would have been very difficult to paint. Now, this tree here, it's gotten very close to the top edge of my canvas. It's almost holding the edge of the painting up. And, oh dear, whoops, I made a dirty mark there. But I have a neat trick to fix that. So how are we going to fix that mess? We could attack it with a baby wipe and start scrubbing off and trying to overpaint it, but I can guarantee things will just get worse. So sit back and watch carefully. I've got something special. I'll show you in a moment. So the tree that's close to the top of the canvas, I make sure goes off the edge. Right, now for that special tool, it's called a clay shaper. It's actually used for modelling clay work, but it acts like a little window squeegee. And some firm pressure, really press, and a little swipe, and nearly all of the colour comes off in one go. And in the blink of an eye, quick bit of work with my fingers just to blend it all together, and just like magic, it disappears. I'll leave a link in the description so you can go and order your one now. It's an affiliate link. You don't pay any extra, but I get a few pennies as a thank you. Let's add some highlights. I've gone into my yellows and green colours with a fan brush. It was the one I originally painted the dark colour on with. I just dry cleaned it. Now remember, light's coming from the right hand side, so that's the brightest side of my tree. I add a little bit of liquid white to my colour occasionally just to soften it and make it stick a little easier. It also makes the highlights really pop on that side, doesn't it? In the centre, they're fairly dark, and towards the base of the trees, I want to keep it nice and dark. I vary my colours. This tree has a little more yellow ochre in it. Again, lots of different varieties of green is essential in a painting, so it doesn't get a bit too samey. I'll even throw a little sparkle down here. Now, let's put some highlights on that waterfall. I'm sort of not too keen on this sort of green colour that Bob had in his original painting, so this is my own little touch. With the edge of my palette knife and a little bit of titanium white, sort of with a little bit of blue mixed into it, I add a few little sparkles. Then, using my fan brush, I do a few little highlights on that little edge here where the waterfall sort of tips over. Again, it's my own little touch, but I think it improves the painting slightly and suits my taste better. But you decide for your own painting what you prefer. And finally, enhance those little splashes a bit more. And I think we're not far away from a finished painting. So there's my version of Valley Waterfall, a lovely Bob Ross classic, and one that you should paint next. But if not, here's another one for you to try.